My name's Nico. I go by COINTrick and cointricktwitch online, and today I'm going to be showing you guys what you need to start making drinks at home. So one of the most common questions that I get is, how do I start my own home bar? Or how do I start making drinks at home? I personally think that you shouldn't start by getting one of everything, because most of the drinks that you're going to end up making will probably be for yourself. I'm going to show you guys the simple hardware and tools that you need, because the ingredients that you have behind the bar are really a small part of everything that you're going to need to start making drinks. Really quick, equipment basically breaks down into three broad categories. Tools, which some people will refer to as barware. There's glassware, which is pretty self-explanatory. And then you have hardware, appliances, and plumbing, which are all kind of going to be in one category. First thing you're going to need is a bottle opener. It should be the first thing that you get. In general, you have something to open beer with, something to open wine with. You might have a combination tool or a wine key or a beer key or something like that. You don't need specialized tools for either of these things. And also, if you're the kind of person who doesn't necessarily enjoy wine, then you probably don't need to get a wine specific tool. Second thing you're gonna need is your shaker. And there are two basic kinds that you can get. So this is the kind that I would recommend. Most bartenders will call this a Boston shaker. Some people will call this a two-piece shaker for pretty obvious reasons. The shaker only comes in two pieces. You have this, which is the other most common thing. This is probably more common when people are bartending at home or when they're making drinks at home for small parties, or just like maybe making one drink for themselves. These are for shaken cocktails. This is called a cobbler shaker, or sometimes you'll see it referred to as a three-piece shaker. Again, for pretty obvious reasons. Pretty specific thing about this one though, this one has a small strainer right here, but if you're using this for a cocktail, I would recommend you still need a fine strainer. Here we have a Hawthorne strainer. This is probably the most ubiquitous, common one that you have. They're not typically powder-coated white. I got this one from Bar Chemistry, so thank you, Wutak, for that. This is a very high-quality one. You can tell because this piece here, this is called the whisk, is very tightly wound. And what that means is it's going to get all of the really fine pulp from your shaken drinks. This is most commonly used on top of an open glass like this. You wouldn't normally use this on a cobbler shaker. This is probably going to go with a Boston shaker if you're using one at home. The second one that you're going to find is a julep strainer, or some people will call this like a holy spoon, slotted spoon. The most common name for this is a julep strainer, and this is typically used with stirred cocktails. You can use it like this inside of a Boston shaker, or like this with the spoon facing either way, to your own personal preference. When the dent in the spoon is facing down, that's going to make it easier to get that leverage. If you have the spoon facing up like this, you can keep it in there, but it's more likely that it's going to slip, and then you might get ice and stuff in your drink. Obviously, this is not going to stop as much of that pulp and stuff from getting in your drink. And this is also more commonly used for stirred drinks in a stirring glass. The third kind, which relatively cheap, affordable, if you're making shaken drinks and you want them to be a little bit extra special, get a fine strainer. Something like this. You'll see people use these to make tea and stuff sometimes, or to sift through like baking powders. But basically, if you do that, it adds that extra measure of fine filtering to make sure that you have the clearest and the cocktail possible and the least pulp in your cocktail as well. If you don't want to make shaken cocktails and you want to make stirred cocktails like dry martinis or old fashions or Manhattans, then you're going to want a stirring glass like this. This one is actually a gift. If you have a stirring glass, this is what you're going to need the julep strainer for. This is typically what I see julep strainers used for. You can, though, Hawthorne strainer, if this is all you have, it's really all you need. The Hawthorne strainer will also stay in there. It's going to be a little bit easier to work with if it's your first time making drinks. Going on with stirred cocktails, you're obviously going to need some kind of stirring utensil. Some people will call this a stirring rod. Some people will call this a bar spoon. Sometimes these bar spoon stirring rods will have extra utensils here at the end. This is a garnish fork. So this is kind of meant to, if you have a peel or something that's gotten in your drink, you can take it out. Only two more main tools, maybe three more main tools that you're going to need. If you're dealing with fresh citrus, fresh juice, you're going to want some kind of knife. I recommend a paring knife to start out with, but you can use really anything. Get a steel knife, get a recommendation from a chef or a friend who cooks. or just use whatever you have in your own kitchen. You'll probably be fine as long as you're not using a chef's knife like this to do peels, which I've done before. Somehow, I still have all 10 of my fingers. You're gonna want some kind of hand juicer. Again, if you're juicing stuff fresh, it will make a phenomenal difference in your cocktails if you do decide to juice fresh. If you're gonna entertain your friends and family, definitely make sure that you have fresh juice on hand. This is called a jigger, Jigger. The most common alternative to this would be like a small measuring cup. You don't need a cobbler shaker and a Boston strainer. You don't need a julep strainer and a Hawthorne strainer. You don't need one of everything for these things. You just kind of need one of each thing in these broad categories. You do need, in my opinion, one set of tools for shaking cocktails and one set of tools for stirred cocktails. So you shouldn't use a stirring glass to make a daiquiri. You shouldn't use your shakers to make a Manhattan. Quick note on specialty tools really quick, just so that nobody gets bogged down. This falls under the broad umbrella of you don't need one of everything, but if the drink that you really, really enjoy and the one drink that you really, really want to learn and master and make at home for yourself and your friends and family and impress people, if that drink really, really needs a swizzle stick or or you need an ice mold, or you need an absinthe spoon or something like that, then go for it. Go crazy. But don't get an absinthe spoon thinking it's going to help you make a better Manhattan. Just start with the basics, especially when you're just starting out. Moving on to glassware. First three things that you should have that are going to be pretty ubiquitous: wine glasses, pint glasses or beer glasses, whatever you want to call them, and shot glasses. So, wine glass. This isn't a pint glass, but this is it's a stein sort of that's meant for beer specifically. The point is that you want something to serve your beer in, and probably the most obvious one that you should have at home is have shot glasses. So moving on to some glassware that's going to be specific to cocktails, if you're teaching yourself cocktails. The first, I think most obvious one, the one that most people start with, is going to be a rocks glass. There are other names for this guy. I call this a rocks glass. I've seen these referred to as old-fashioned glasses, and I've seen these referred to as low balls, typically because whatever is served in this is served over ice or rocks. The next thing that you're probably gonna want, highball glass. Again, as I mentioned before, low ball, highball. Ball is just a term for a glass. Another term for this might be a Collins glass. This is the kind of thing that you would use for Bloody Marys and mojitos. Old-fashioned glass is obviously what you're gonna use for old fashions, but also things like whiskey sours. If you're serving something that is not on ice, this is your third most common kind. I'll hold it up here in camera one so that you guys can see this. The two main terms for this kind of glassware, or stemware, because it has a stem, the two main names for this that you guys will hear will be a coupe glass, which is what probably most specifically refers to this, though you could probably call this a margarita glass because of how big it is, or a martini glass. The main difference between a martini glass and a coupe glass, rhetorically speaking, is that a martini glass will often have unbeveled edges that just go straight up. The one that probably has the most stuff in it, the category that has the most stuff in it, again, this is going to be your appliances, like if you, I don't know, anything that you can hold in your hand, your hardware, which is going to be fixed in place, or vice versa, and your plumbing. If you look at all of those things together, you only need three things. You guys can probably guess what it is. You need a sink. You don't need to have it at your bar. If the only sink that you have in your whole house besides your bathroom is in your kitchen, that's fine. And then a trash can. Make sure you have something to dispose of any of your discarded twists, any garnish that people don't want to drink, any garnish that you don't want to drink. The third thing, and this has a bunch of asterisks around it, is an ice maker. Do you want to have ice? But the ice that you get from your freezer, even the ice that you just get from an ice tray, is going to be fine when you're just starting out. Don't get too bogged down on whether you need clear ice or pellet ice or crushed ice or a Lewis bag. Just make sure that you have ice. Make sure you have a consistent stream of ice. Those are the basics of what you need to get started making a bar at home or making drinks at home, or however you want to phrase it. If you want to know more about ingredients that you need to get started, which I talked about very quickly at the beginning, I want to do more of these kinds of videos in these live streams, but specific to certain classic cocktails, so that you guys don't get bogged down with, oh, well, hold on, I need a dry vermouth and a sweet vermouth and a blanco tequila and a reposado tequila and a silver rum and an aged rum and a drum still rum. And if there are any classic cocktails that you guys want to start making at home and you want to know where to start, and then maybe a couple of extra steps. So those, I mean, typically I would say I'd recommend getting one of each of the ingredients that you need just to make the drink. And then I'll show you guys how to sort of dial it in to make the drink the way that you like it, and then making variations of that drink with similar ingredients. So that means swapping out the whiskey for a different whiskey in an old fashioned. So maybe if you learned how to make it with bourbon, which would be classic, maybe learning how to make it with rye whiskey, or go a step further and learning how to make it with scotch. The last thing that I'm going to show you guys in this series is where you can take that and the next drinks that you can learn. Whatever classic cocktails you guys want to know how to make, let me know. Let me know in chat. Let me know in the comments when this is on YouTube. And yeah, excited to make those videos for you guys. I have a question about bartending. Do you have to go to college to be one? In my experience, no. I do have a bachelor's degree in film studies. It has nothing to do with my bartending whatsoever. It has helped me put all of this stuff together. There are some bars and there are some places in the world, some regions of the world that will require you to have some kind of certificate of completion or some sort of proof of experience behind the bar. Those places are pretty rare, and for example, if you started in the US like I have, where we don't have any of those specific kinds of regulations, if I decided to bartend in London, my classwork would be commuted to my experience bartending in the US. And so I would just qualify for that certificate most of the time. There are bartending schools, there are bartending classes. Be very wary of those if you're looking to break into bartending. Taking that class and getting that certificate will not get you hired as a bartender. It might get you hired at a bar, but you will almost always start out as a barback or a server.